The almost perfect podcast. That's the thing. That's what I dig about your position now and like the show that you've got is it gives you this opportunity to do something that I think you've cared about a hell of a lot. So that is like talk about sex and make it more of a normal thing to talk about kinky things and talk about the way the body works. And Fiber Femo has given you quite a lot of freedom.
It really has. And I think, you were talking about if it's opened up work avenues, maybe not so much in terms of bookings and gigs that I'm getting paid for yet, but it has given me the opportunity to speak to people who are a whole lot smarter than I am and who know so much more about the things that I'm interested in. So I've had such interesting guests coming on the show and talking about their particular fields of interest, talking about rope bondage and talking about masturbation, someone who wrote a book about masturbation in the US, talking on national radio in South Africa, talking about Sexual Debut with Nicole Hodges, who is a Canadian sexual freedom philosopher who's really into like psychedelics and sex. That's like her thing, is like kink, psychedelics and sex vibes. And she's kind of started this, well, she's spearheading this movement called Sexual Debut and talking about the reframing of virginity, for example, on air. I spoke to Cam Fraser, who's Australia's leading sex coach for men, because Women's Month came along and there's always one guy who's like, when do we get Men's Month? Yeah. From September to July. That is your Men's Month. But I was like, cool, if we're going to have a Men's Month, we're going to use it to talk about vulnerability with men. We're going to use it to interrogate why men are the way that they are, particularly in such a violent country. So I spoke to Cam and it was so interesting. He told me about man box theory. Do you know about man box theory?
Nope.
So it was this theory derived in the 80s where the theory is that men don't have, or masculinity doesn't have a definition outside of being the absence of femininity.
Okay.
Right? Because like, how would you describe masculinity?
Aggression.
Anything else?
Posturing.
So then what does positive masculinity look like?
Positive masculinity is it's like kindness, caring, but not that. It's a special word I'm trying to think of. Not tenderness. It's like when you grow a plant, what's that called?
Nurturing.
Nurturing, yes. Like,
but nurturing is traditionally seen as a feminine quality.
I don't see, like, okay, maybe because I grew up with just a mom, I see that role of a parent, as being a nurturing role no matter what.
Yeah.
So I would assume that the male equivalent might, depending if it's a positive aspect, would be nurturing.
But parenthood is something that's thrust upon women way more than it is upon men.
Fair.
So, I mean, talking masculinity specifically, so the theory is that masculinity is the absence of femininity. So in order to be considered masculine, you cannot have any feminine qualities. The manliest of men are men who are not feminine.
Yeah.
So it's
They're
kind
also
of
psychopaths.
Yeah, well, yeah, but the box for what a man could be, sort of in the 80s, was like a provider, someone who could go and fight and be in war,
so
go to work.
That's providing was probably they're more so than nurturing.
But now, as the role of women has grown and expanded, the box for what femininity can be has grown larger, and therefore the man box gets smaller and smaller and more extreme. Because if being a provider is now a feminine quality, if being able to go to war is now a feminine quality, why doesn't
that just open the box up? Why does it make it
agree with you. No, I agree with you. But if masculinity is defined by what femininity is not, if the definition for what's femininity grows, then the man box gets smaller and smaller and more radical, and men feel less and less like they know who and what they are, because now if women can do anything, then what does that mean I can do? Where is my identity?
Yeah, but having your identity tied to your gender is silly anyway.
It's completely bullshit. I agree. But learning about that theory was really informative for me in terms of how I see masculinity, particularly in South Africa, where, unemployment is so high. And now if you can't get a job, how are you going to be the provider? Mm-hmm. And now your wife is the provider, and you feel like that is an indictment on your masculinity.